So today we are discussing about software documentation, which is the topic of software engineering and structured system analysis and design. So let's see what is software documentation. So software documentation is the well-written record of facts in software engineering, and it covers all written documents and materials that deals with the software system product development. Many authors says that it is an umbrella. Software documentation is an umbrella in which many things will be documented like testing, requirements, specifications, coding, source code, etc. Now, in software documentation, different types of documents are created through the SDLC, or we can say that the complete SDLC phases. Documentation exists to explain product functionality, information, and allow for discussing all significant questions arising between stakeholders as well as developers and testers also, and to in extent for researchers, for actioners, for practitioners, etc. So if we can classify the software documentation, then there are two major types of software documentation. Number one is product documentation, and the another one is process documentation. Whereas product documentation is further divided into two parts. Number one is system documentation, and it covers requirement documentation. And now the important point is here, requirement document means the functional requirement as well as the non-functional requirements. Design and architecture, source code, validation, verification, and testing. Here it is written as testing. It means the complete testing, maintenance or help or a guide. After that, second one is user documentation. User documentation is divided into two parts: end user and system administrators. And the major second part of software documentation is process documentation. It covers plans, estimates, schedules, reports, working papers, standards, etc. So here is user documentation, which is a part of product documentation, and it covers system introduction, or we can say that system overview, and installation, beginner's guide, references, and to what extent an enhancement of system introduction and what are the requirements would be enhanced, and system administration, and whatever the factors or sub important features of these factors. So all these factors are important in as per the point of view of user documentation, whereas we have already discussed that user documentation is a part of product documentation. Here the difference between system and software is software is not a product. After releasing the software, we can say that that particular software system is a product. So that's why we are covering all these factors under documentation. Now this is system documentation, which is also a part of product documentation. Why? Because software is a term which is used for programs. With the help of programs, with the help of code, with the help of documentation, will develop a product. So we defined it as product documentation. While after product documentation, we discussed user documentation. Now system documentation is a part of product documentation. So this is the hierarchy in which we have discussed this. So system rationale, SRS is nothing, software requirement specification document, or we can say that a software manual, and whatever the specifications consist of in this SRS, that would be covered. And implementation is nothing, that is your system implementation, what we have discussed in our previous lectures. And test plan, this is also we have discussed in our previous lecture. And here, if we categorize the test plan, then we have two test plans like system and acceptance. So when we talking about when we are talking about testing, then unit integration and system testing. So these basic types of testing are of on the basis of modules, to checking the modules. And the last one is data dictionaries. Here we will find that data or raw facts and figures or their refinements are present or not, and on the basis of those facts and figures we will develop a soft system documentation. And if we're talking about the last, process documentation, so that will cover the plans, estimates, which is a part of measurement, in which we will measure the time estimation and effort estimation, size estimation, complexity measures, etc. So this is our software documentation.